joined in the live stream area by two. Who do I do first? Warren Huart. Say hello to everybody.
Hello, everybody.
And Glenn Fricker.
Fricker.
Oh. I do apologize, Glenn.
I'll get your coach.
How's it going, everybody?
Excellent. So, I have hunted you guys down for the last 4 days.
You actually have.
Did you? At every point, I've even kicked over a mic stand to get your attention. Did that work?
Yes, but it really did get that.
I wonder if we had Glenn's reaction on camera. I remember it quite vividly.
Can we perhaps revisit that now?
Yes. We were doing massive drums in a German castle, and it was quite.
It was insane.
It was ridiculous. It was the most craziest drum sound I've ever heard.
You
in my
know,
life.
I think we answered the question once and for all. Does the room matter? Yes, it does.
Oh boy, does it ever!
Excellent.
And we just arranged this pair of AKG C414s, just beautiful stereo pair, you know. And
100 on an interface.
True.
So we kind of leveled that off and
Yeah.
came to a nice conclusion that every little part has a knock-on effect to the other.
oh yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I don't disagree with that. I mean, obviously, there's sort of, you know, within that there's tolerances.
Yes.
But yes, you certainly don't want to have. I think first thing is make sure you have good, clean power for your synth. You know, if it's not grounded and it's going bzzz, that's not
We
good.
didn't cover it. We didn't cover grounding. There you go. That's tip number one. Put that on the top of the
Well, I
list.
think when you're,
yeah.
you know, when you're an engineer and you're in especially when you're in recording studios. I mean, the assistants, when you're tracking live bands, whether it be, you know, a guy playing synth or you know, a guy playing bass or whatever it might be, there's always little power issues you have to deal with, and you're sitting there continually, you know, flicking polarity on DI boxes, and of course synths are one of those as well. Yeah, that's a pretty important thing. And then of course, you know, if you've got your synth going through an amp.
Well, that's something we kind of slightly touched on,
Yeah.
but didn't really. And I thought you guys, after the castle drum scenario, I thought that would be a nice little.
This will forever be known as the mic knocking over.
Mike knocking over castle scenario.
Yes.
Jervis. Yes. So,
Yeah, I mean, amps are they're a huge. There's a guy I've worked with on and off over the years called Zach Ray. He's a very very well known in Los Angeles keyboard player. He's an English guy. Who's been there forever, and that's one of his things. He'll turn up to a session with everything in mind. He'll turn up with a laptop, and he'll come out of a 3.5 mini jack from the headphone output and go into a radial DI and then split that for you, and he'll trigger sounds, you know, virtual instrument sounds. But he'll also turn up with a clavinet and a Rhodes and a Whirly and a Jupiter and, you know, everything, a Moog and everything. And he'll also do the same thing. He'll send you a DI signal, but he's also big on amps.
Yeah.
And there's something unique because, let's be honest, back in the olden days, everything went through amps. There wasn't really much choice.
Absolutely.
You know, Rhodes was an amp, a Whirly was an amp, a clavinet was going through an amp, and they're all sorts of principles that are very similar to guitars.
Yeah.
I mean, they're all electromagnetic pickups.
Yeah.
You know, a clavinet through an amp sounds absolutely fucking awesome. You know, it's basically just plucking strings like a guitar.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's a big part of it. And again, more potential grounding issues. Good quality cables are important.
Wow.
You know?
Yeah, absolutely.
You
Absolutely.
know, you don't have to spend $1 bazillion on them, but I think a decent enough quality cable so that you're not getting a ton of interference, you're not getting signal degradation. I was talking to Mick from that pedal show on the bus on the way over, but Mick and Daniel, and they were saying, you know, because I was saying, oh, there's people who've done videos putting a nail. Have you seen that video? A nail across a contact, and said, you don't need a high quality cable. Look, a nail will do it. And I was like, that's not my experience. And they're like, yeah, it's below me. You run like 40+ foot cable. I'm sure you've done this, of a low quality kind of, you know, I don't want to knock Guitar Center, but you know, an entry level $10 Guitar Center cable. It's gonna start off going crang and end up going, you know.
That's how gonna go.
It's just a fact. So there's so many other things in it. The I/O is definitely important.
Yeah.
No two ways about it. But it's really the architecture around the I/O.
Okay.
Because a lot of these guys are using exactly the same chip.
Exactly.
Ah, okay. So AD's DAs.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so the architecture around it can be.
It's the analog signal path around that chip
Yeah.
that's going to make all the difference.
It really does make a huge difference. And so in the cheaper end, the $200, sub $200, they're probably pretty much the same.
Same thing, yeah. Okay.
Although I saw somebody do a review that I respect of the cheapest, like $50 IO, and put it up against a 200 to 300, and the difference was actually quite massive.
Interesting.
I don't know what was different. I mean, there's only look. There's probably only so much you can do for $50.
For sure.
You know,
Sure.
and if I think it was a Behringer one, a Behringer. If that's what somebody needs to get making music,
And this is the thing that we did touch on.
yeah,
It's art.
yeah.
We are artists creating
Sure.
things out of thin air, out of the
Gear
ether.
matters, but it doesn't.
Yeah,
but it
absolutely.
does, but it doesn't.
If you've got a budget,
Yeah.
make sure that your budget fits and you get every stage covered to include the cable.
There
All the
was.
way down
Do
to-
you remember that band in England? I think it was like early '90s. They won the Mercury Music Prize, whatever it's called.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm blanking on their name. It's really annoying. I can't remember it. And it was album of the year. And it was a band, and this was before like self-recording was like a big deal. Now, of course, everybody self-records albums that were top 10. But in those, I'm blanking on the name. Answers on a postcard, please.
Sister's address.
Yeah. Blue Peter, PO Box. What a the English watching know what I'm doing, or the British. Anyway, so I don't remember what it's called. But it was up against, and this will give us context, up against Simply Red's
Oh wow,
album,
okay.
Stars.
Yeah. Who were, the early 90s were massive. So
Yeah, absolutely
Well,
massive.
80s, yeah.
Yeah, either late 80s or early 90s. And they won the album of the year, Mercury Prize. Everybody says, yes, what's an amazingly well recorded. And then somebody calculated how much their album cost to make. And then went to see the budget of the Simply Red album, which is a masterpiece, don't get me wrong, and found out that the catering budget alone for the Simply Red record was more than the whole budget. The gear they bought, the amount of time it took, because they bought their own gear, all together was less than the catering budget from the Simply Red record. So that pretty much sums it up. The creativity will always win.
Yeah, as long as it sounds as good. That reminds me of the scene in one of your favourite films, Bad News, where they're actually at the catering and stop
We
eating
paid
it.
for
We
that.
paid for that. So, sorry. But yeah, no, absolutely.
Or Spinal Tap.
Yes.
I have to
can't-
fold it.
I can't work with this.
I'm a professional. I can't work with it.
Exactly, brilliant. So, okay, so that covers kind of getting sound in and playing with that kind of stuff. Any kind of crazy tips for maybe taking a synthesizer into an amp? Anything? I mean,
Well, Radial, our Canadian friends, do a reamp box, which is freaking
Oh, I've used
unbelievable.
one forever. They're great.
However, shout out to new products. Both IK Multimedia and Audion both have guitar-orientated IOs. But it doesn't have to be guitar-orientated, but the guitar that have a reamp already built into it.
so you can take it wherever you need after you've captured it, or you can capture it.
Yep.
Send it out to a damp after.
Yep. Which is a very smart thing. I'm assuming and hoping that every IO company will just start having that as a feature.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Another thing would be, run your keyboard through maybe an amp that you wouldn't really think of using it. I had that discussion with a mutual friend as well. He's like, run signals through the crappy amps that were like designed for guitar but don't really sound too good.
Yeah.
Run other things through them. And you
Yeah.
might be surprised what you get. Big keyboards into that sort of thing. Or I've got an old Gallagher solid state amp from like the early 90s.
Yeah.
And we've run some interesting stuff with there from time to time. We've got some really phenomenal results.
So find anything lying around, plug it in, try it out.
Sure.
If you like it, it's good.
If it doesn't sound good, no big deal, but
Yeah.
you might find something really cool.
And of course, amp emulations. I mean,
Yeah.
look,
Yeah.
for those of you watching that have Pro Tools, which is the DAW I know best. I'm not saying it's the best, it's just the one I know the best. The SansAmp plugin that comes free is just amazing on everything. It just screws it up in the best possible way. So if you're not sure what to do, just open up SansAmp and start messing with it. I think the other day I teach, I'm an associate professor at this school in the Netherlands, which is a huge shout out to, called Art EZ or Art EZ, depending where you're from. and they have amazing high qualities. Lots of Dutch and German students go there, and they'll send me multi-tracks to critique, and I Skype with them for a couple of hours. And one of the things that I noticed is there's a little bit, they're really super creative, but this guy played me this track, and I was like, wow, I really like your Juno 60 sound. He's like, how did you know? Just from the 2-track. I was like, dude, I grew up with Juno 60s and they have such a great sound. But I think that what that's pointing to is like, it depends on whose ears it is. To him, that's new, fresh, and exciting. Because he's going back to discover 80s keyboard sound. For me, I remember when it was new.
Absolutely.
So I think that, you know what I mean? I think it's okay to just remember, like, individuality and creativity is so different for so many people. And that there's no right way or wrong way. But I think that's what we're sort of talking about, is like, mess it up in any way, shape or form that you can. And I think to your point, you were saying, try anything out. I always say this, so those of you that watch me will glaze over. I have a Baldwin student piano. I think it's called a Hamilton.
Right.
It is dreadful, but it's my dreadful piano. And nobody else has my dreadful piano. If you have a room, Glenn will tell you, he's tracked drums in his own studio, and it's minuscule, isn't it?
Sure.
And the thing is, but nobody else has your room.
Yeah, exactly.
So your drum sound is your drum sound. My crappy piano is my crappy piano. And that's what's interesting, because we can all open up and use the Vienna Symphony Orchestra. All of us have, I mean, when we were kids that wasn't possible,
No,
but
of
now
course
you
not.
can go,
That's what you
Beckstein
use. So
in, you know, Beckstein in the best hall in the world, recorded with expensive mics by a genius engineer.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's becoming commonplace.
I know.
What's not commonplace is you plugging into some little battery-operated Fender amp or something, one of those like $20 amps, or
Pignos or
Yeah.
Joyo
absolutely.
Bandcamp or something like
Done
that, and just running some keys through that.
Yeah. A lot of my favourite albums from the 70s are bands like Can and Faust.
Sure.
And they were recording in warehouses with found
if you want to
sound.
start a prog rock conversation, I'm going to put my
really
feet up.
haven't
Right, okay,
time for that,
guys.
but
Let's
we
break
could.
down Mother Up Duff now.
We could
okay?
do that.
We could break down Mother Up Duff now if you want. If you want to talk about that. No, I grew up. I'm a prog head, and I think that. But like the prog we're talking about is
absolutely.
like is more song based and more melodic based. And prog now, I think everybody just thinks shredding. It's you know.
Prog metal based stuff.
Yeah, prog metal, but yeah,
Which isn't very progressive,
right.
in my opinion.
Well, I can't talk authoritatively about it because I don't know the genre like you do, but I trust you. But yeah, the prog I grew up on was Can and Henry Cow, and then of course all the Canterbury scene bands, which were just insane. Hatfield in the North, National Health, huge Crimson fan, obviously, and Genesis fan, obviously the obvious one. But
We
so
could carry on
Caravan
for 3 hours.
in the land of grey
Oh,
and pink, where only Go Go's go to sing. They'll be coming home tonight. Those horrible Grimbly Grumbles will be climbing down your chimney.
Oh,
Okay.
yes. So,
Poor old Glenn is like, what the
he's gone.
heck
These
are
guys
these English
are
idiots talking about?
off in their own little world. But yes.
Yes.
But that's kind of where I came in, I suppose, the same as you, with all the kind of making things, pushing things, recording wise, and trying to get as much out of nothing.
I feel like a 57 or an equivalent, inexpensive, dynamic microphone, an I/O that has at least one input.
Yeah.
And the best thing, I think it was Music Radar, who actually I just spoke to, interviewed. I think they interviewed me like 10 years ago, and they had, this is before I started the YouTube channel, they had top 10 questions that I think they were asking all these different producers. And one of the questions completely changed my opinion on everything. The question was, Warren, what does it feel like now that you have an access to $2 million of equipment? It's true. I used to go to a recording studio when I was a teenager, my first recording session, and I'd go in there, and maybe it was an expensive studio, and they had 2 reverbs, like they had a Rev 7, and maybe they had a Lexicon, maybe maybe they had something really fancy. Maybe they had a PCM 42 delay, wow, and maybe they had one Roland delay. Then there may have been a tape echo, and maybe a chamber or a plate. possibly 5 or 6.
Yeah.
And that was like, ha, and you had 5 or 6 auxiliaries on the console. But then you had to say, well, I don't really want to use the snare reverb on the guitar. So the snare had its own reverb. And then you're like, well, there's a stereo guitar reverb for all of the guitars. And then you're like, well, but what about the reverb on the vocal? And then you're like, going, well, which one should I do? And you only had 24 tracks on the tape machine, so you couldn't print anything. So the point was, is you were sitting there like with 5 multi-effects if you were lucky. Nowadays, you're like, I want a reverb on the snare, 1 on the kick. I want a different left reverb on my guitar to my right reverb on my guitar. You know, I want a delay on this, a delay on that. And he was right. This was a marvelous question 10 plus years ago. I'm like, oh yeah. I used to have, and I used to think there was a lot of gear. Now it's like 20 studios in one DAW, any DAW.
So limit yourself.
Yeah. Well, understand that you have all of those things at your fingertips, and that you can do anything you want. I think that's the thing. Because even if you watch mine and Glenn's channel, maybe we give you a lot of information, but the reality is you've got all of that gear and more just in any DAW. Doesn't matter who makes it.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah, the trick is you just got to make some choices.
Yeah.
That's the hardest part I find with all this tech being available, is just being able to narrow it down to making a choice and actually doing something.
Yeah, no, I think that I went, the first studio I went to maybe had a Rolling Space Echo and I think, oh my god, an art reverb.
Talk about reamping though.
And 24 tracks, and that was it. And you you had to work with that and get what you could for your money. But yeah,
he mentions the reamping box. I mean, like there were times where I reamped rhythm guitars on a record. I don't know, 17, 18 times. I got obsessed. I had notes and notes and notes and stacks and stacks and stacks of notes. And finally, you kind of learn to back off a little bit by, just having that option. It can be great, but it can also screw you.
Yeah.
Well, amp technology now is just so far advanced. When we were kids, like getting a big guitar sound was very difficult because you had Marshalls, which were amazing, but they just don't have the low end. And then you had like maybe the early Bogners and stuff, or early Mesa Boogies, and they had the low end, but they didn't have the bite of a Marshall. Now, I mean, like guys like your friends Rev, our friends Rev. I mean, they make an amp that has the low end and the high end. It has what you wanted from the Mesa and what you wanted from the Marshall and more. But when we were kids, you had to take one of those 2 amps and manipulate it so heavily to be this big guitar sound. Now, between plugins and amazing amps, it's like you're 90% of the way there. It's so different. But God bless it. I'm glad it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Spoiled, but in a nice way.
In a good way. Yeah.
Guys, thank you very much for
Thank
your
you.
time. It's been an absolutely pleasure to
Marvellous.
share time on that Prog Rock chat. We'll be having that later.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't forget, producelikeapro.com. No.
SpectreMedia.ca.
And Jason Jervis from the Total Snitch channel. If you haven't already subscribed, please do like